Hey Gracers, Pastor Tim here, and I want to take just a few moments to give you a little update on what's happening now with reopening. No doubt you've heard some churches are reopening, and maybe some of you are wondering, when are we going to reopen? You probably heard the president, Donald Trump, made a pretty bold statement the other day and said that he wants churches open. And one of the things that I appreciate about living in the United States of America is that we really work hard to protect church and state, but at the same time, we have an understanding in this country that religion is important, whether it's Christianity or Judaism or the Muslim faith or Hinduism. It's important, and we see it as essential. The one thing that sort of got lost in the president's big remark about church is that to open our churches, we need to follow CDC guidelines. And that came up in the press conference later. And so what I'd like to do is take a couple minutes to talk about what that means and give you a couple reasons why it is that we're slowing down the process. Even though there are other churches who are moving ahead and good on them, we're slowing down the process, and I want to explain why that is. First of all, from a practical standpoint, if we were to follow the CDC guidelines, we don't feel like we could do good worship here. To follow the CDC guidelines means that we have to social distance people 6 feet apart. So you're sitting in this isolated bubble. You've got to wear a face mask. You can't do congregational singing because what we're learning about this virus, of course, is that it's spread through the air. And singing in a contained building just keeps all of that stuff in the air, and we breathe it in, and that's what's making us sick. And so CDC guidelines are downplaying congregational singing. We can't come forward to do communion. We're going to have to do communion at our seats somehow. We just don't feel like we can do a really good, moving, meaningful worship service when we're isolated from each other. And so we would rather put our energy into doing the best possible online worship services that we can do until we can figure out how to do a really good socially distanced worship service. So that's our first reason. The second reason why we're slowing down the process is probably more important. For us, the question isn't when are we going to reopen, although it's an important one. The question is, what does it look like now to be the church in this new COVID-19 world? Even though some things may go back to somewhat normal, church will never be normal again. We will never look at church the way we did prior to March. We're going to be physical and digital. We're going to be digital and physical. And what does it mean for us to be the church in a world that's radically changed? What does it mean to follow Jesus in this new world? What's really essential? What are the things that we should do as a church? What are the things that we've done in the past that maybe we don't need to do anymore? What should worship look like after we've been doing online worship for these many, many months? How do we worship together? How do we be Jesus together? And so we're using this time to ask some really tough questions. We're doing a lot of webinars, we're doing a lot of reading, we're listening to experts. What might the church look like? And gone are the days, by the way, of the 4 to 5 year plan. Now we're talking about 30 days of planning and then looking at it again every 30 days because the world is changing so quickly. The one thing we know is that Jesus doesn't change. The gospel message doesn't change, but the way that we go about church is going to change dramatically. We want to be ready for it. And we want to make sure that when we get back together physically, that we're going where Jesus wants us to go. So our prayer is that we follow Jesus wherever Jesus leads us. And we've always known for 15 years that we're never quite sure where that's going to be. I'm not quite sure what the church is going to look like in this new world, but Jesus knows, and we want to follow Jesus. Today in my devotions, I was reading the introduction to the book of Thessalonians, or actually the letter that Paul wrote to the church in Thessalonica. And the story is that Paul started a church in Thessalonica, and then weeks after he started the church, was run out of town by his enemies. And because Paul couldn't be present with the church anymore, he had to think up a new way to do church with those folks. And so he used the technology of his day, which was letter writing. He wrote a letter to the church, sent it with a trusted friend, and that became Paul's way of building the church. In part, was sending letters to them using the technology of the day. And that's what we're wrestling with as your staff and leadership. What does this new world mean? What does all this technology mean? It has fast-forwarded everything. And so we want to make sure that as we get back together, that we're the church that's ready for this new day. So we're going to slow down the process. Again, I know there are other churches who are starting up, and good on them. We want to slow down a little bit and make sure that we're ready to go. One of the things I really appreciate about you is that you have not been putting pressure on leadership to open up. There have been a few of you who have asked, when can we open up? But most of you have said, take your time, slow it down. And what that means to me is that you trust your staff and you trust your leadership. And we're honored by that and humbled by that. And we want to make sure that we live up to your trust in us. So we're going to slow down the process. We're going to pray through the process. We're going to work to make sure that when we get back together for worship, that it's good worship, even if we're socially distanced, but more than that, together we're going to prayerfully figure out what it looks like to follow Jesus as the church in this brand new world. So I appreciate your patience. I appreciate your prayers and your support and your encouragement. I appreciate your generosity so that we can keep doing ministry together. And we'll continue to bring you updates. Until that time, we're going to connect with you every single day of the week via technology, and what a gift that is right now. So thanks for being a part of Grace. Keep praying together that God will bring healing to His world and a new vision to Community of Grace.